So there has been a flip. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but some of the progressive commentators that spoke out against the genocide and said genocide is a red line have seemed to flip or change course once the moment that Kamala Harris was announced as the candidate for the Democratic Party which technically she is the candidate, but it'll be official at the DNC convention. But once it was announced that Biden dropped out and she was now running, they seem to have switched. And I just we'll start with Cenk Uygur first, and then we'll go to Kyle Kulinski. And then in the end, I want to explain to you why this is happening. I think it's always good to get back to the why. Now, it was just a little while ago, Cenk Uygur said he was considering supporting RFK Jr. This didn't make sense to me either, because RFK is horrible on Israel as well. So where Cenk Uygur was going on to all these different shows, going on to Piers Morgan and debating Zionists and telling people they're wrong about the Palestinian, it was kind of weird to me even then that he was considering RFK, knowing how horrible he was on this issue. Remember this?
Continue to press for another Democratic nominee who will maintain the status quo, while RFK Jr. has a real opportunity to win this thing and to get money out of politics. Jonathan, I don't know any host on the left that has been fair to RFK Jr. at all, period, a single one, let alone as fair as me. So I'm telling you his downsides, I'm telling you his upsides. No one ever tells you his upsides, but I'm not gonna hide his downsides. So the reality is he has both of those, and I don't know what to do with them, right? So, but as I said last night, I got enough balls to say I'm considering him, which is like in my world, that's heresy. Like in my circles, they'll burn me at the stake for saying I'm considering RFK Jr. Okay. But I am, because his housing is better, his defense is better, his money in politics is way better. And I say, if you give me a random American, I'll take them over Biden or Trump, because I know I'm going to get wall-to-wall corruption with Biden and wall-to-wall lunacy and potential fascism with Trump. So I'll take a rando. At least they're not crooked, right? They're going to be honest. Maybe they're the right, left, or whatever, but at least they're not going to be crooks. So if I'll take a rando, will I take RFK Jr. over these two clowns? I don't know. I haven't made up my mind yet. But so if you're in the camp of hating me for that, now go ahead and hate me. If you're in the camp of saying, no, you should have already made up your mind to support him, go ahead and hate me for that. Or just let's all try to figure this thing out together.
So, yeah, that was a little bit of a flashback there of Cenk Uygur considering supporting RFK Jr. This was also during the time, again, when he was debating Zionists heavily about Israel and Gaza. Now, he did interview RFK Jr. and he did push him pretty hard on Israel and Gaza. But it was just interesting how he would say that genocide, like this was a red line, this is a no-no, that kind of thing. But then he said that he was considering supporting RFK Jr., who he knew wanted to continue to give Israel funding, called the Palestinian people pampered, that type of thing. So that was them. Either way, he wasn't willing to support Joe Biden, obviously, right? Now, he went from considering RFK Jr. to this, and a lot of people are doing this. And I'm like, you guys just hopped on a train. He said, when we started the effort to replace Biden about a year ago, we were told it was impossible. The Young Turks audience believed all along that we could make a difference, but even we wouldn't have believed a Harris Waltz ticket. That was beyond my dreams. Wow. Hope is ascendant, right? So notice how he became very excited once Kamala Harris entered the race. All of a sudden, it was going from, again, I'm not supporting RFK, but I'm just showing you about principle. All of a sudden, it was, again, considering supporting RFK Jr. to let's go right back to the Dems. Let's go right back to the Dems. And we're talking about two completely different political ideologies here. You had RFK Jr. talking about, a central intelligence, these alphabet letter agencies. They have definitely different views about the pandemic. Kamala and RFK do. So you're talking about two, for the most part, other than them both being like Democrats, they're very different, very different. But the moment something shiny was put in front of him, which was Kamala Harris and not Joe Biden, he was ready to jump on that train. You also have to remember a moment in time when Rick Caruso was running for mayor in Los Angeles as a Republican. Cenk Uygur publicly announced that he was willing to support Rick Caruso because he was tired of the crime and he was tired of the homelessness. He was willing to support a Republican. He got a lot of pushback for that, right? A lot of pushback for that. Now, let's go on because I want to show you a pattern. Then there was this. Thank you, Super Nintendo Chalmers. Brianna Wu and Cenk Uygur are pro Shapiro. Massive red flags. Brianna Wu was one of the journalists that was out there heavily smearing Brianna Joy Gray, by the way, on Twitter. Then he wrote this article for Newsweek. Don't fall for the misinformation campaign. Josh Shapiro is the progressive choice for VP. This guy right here, the Josh Shapiro that apparently covered up a murder, the Josh Shapiro that called the Palestinian activists the KKK, the Josh Shapiro that want to punish colleges that want to divest from Israel. Remember, I told you this guy was not good. And he definitely was not progressive. He wrote an entire article telling people that he was the progressive choice. After, again, he spent all that time debating Zionists about Israel, about Gaza. Out of all the people that Kamala Harris was entertaining for VP, he wanted that guy, Josh Shapiro. So then there was that. Then I'm going to fast forward a little bit here. We're going to get to this part here because I want to show you he acknowledges that she's not going to do the issue thing, the Israel thing well. Watch this. So it's coming from this tweet from Phil Gordon, who is Kamala Harris's a part of her advisory, right? VP has been clear she will always ensure Israel is able to defend itself against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist groups. She does not support an arms embargo on Israel. She will continue to work to protect civilians in Gaza and to uphold international humanitarian law. So first of all, the Biden-Harris administration has not been upholding international humanitarian law because Israel has broken multiple rules according to the UN, and has multiple war crimes, and the US continues to give them the bomb. So there's that. So he retweeted that. Translation: we will never do anything to defy Israel. If you're not going to touch the funding, please stop insulting our intelligence that you're doing anything at all. Rebukes and sternly worded messages to Netanyahu are a joke. Harris' ticket will be useless on this issue. So here is Cenk Uygur acknowledging that Kamala Harris, they will be useless on this issue. Now, having said that, if you know that and you see that and it's right in front of you, and after all these months, you've been telling people that this genocide is a red line, you've been debating people about what Israel's doing is wrong and we need a ceasefire and this isn't right, why would you support her? And I'm not speaking to the people who were not saying these things since October 7th. I'm not speaking to you. I'm not speaking to any of the liberals who were not a part of this at all. I'm speaking specifically to the people that were heavily, and he was one of the ones that were heavily out there debating people, calling for a ceasefire, saying genocide is a red line. And the moment it switched to Kamala Harris, even though she's a part of the Biden-Harris administration and she gave her support for Israel, and you knew that she had AIPAC funding, and you knew that she was with the Israeli lobby, and you knew that she was saying these things about Israel has a right to defend itself. You knew that. Why is it that all of a sudden genocide wasn't a red line? And I want to explain to you something about the pattern that I noticed with him. This has happened before. In 2016, going back, remember TYT told everybody, got to support Bernie Sanders. Remember that? They were all on the Bernie train the first time, right? We got to support progressives and yada, yada, all that kind of thing. Remember in the end, they told you to support Hillary Clinton? Well, you got to support Hillary Clinton so you don't get Donald Trump. Remember that? Fast forward, Bernie 2020. Once again, got on the Bernie train. Now, Bernie was even more popular in 2020 than he was in 2016, right? So he had even more momentum. Polling number one a lot of times. So we get to 2020 and they said, yeah, we got to get behind Bernie. But then all of a sudden, one of the hosts decides, I'm actually going to support Elizabeth Warren. So TYT effectively split their audience between Bernie and Elizabeth Warren. I don't know if everybody remembers this, but I remember this very well because this is before I started the show. So now you had, if I remember correctly, I believe Emma Vigilant was supporting Elizabeth Warren. And Cenk Uygur was like, no, we're supporting Bernie. It was either Emma or it was Anna. It was one of them. I forget. So there was a split there with the audience. Anyway, long story short, Bernie ended up suspending his campaign. You guys remember how that ended, and said everybody should support Joe Biden. Once again, Cenk Uygur goes, oh, well, look, we can't get Donald Trump again. We got to get this guy out of here. So you just got to go support Biden. Right? So what I wanted to show you is that there have been a number of times where someone like Cenk Uygur constantly told you not to support candidates that take corporate money, not to support candidates that especially don't support Medicare for all. Remember, that was the litmus test for progressives. But in the end, he always told you to go with the corporate option. So this really isn't new. What is different this time around is that there is a genocide. And I would think of all the things that people would not want to vote for, it's that, or would not want to reward, it's that. But he's even willing to flip on that. Let's go to Kyle Kulinski. Does everybody remember this? Just a couple of months ago, when Biden was not doing well in the polls, Jill Stein hosted an event, one of her webinars. I think this was her birthday webinar. And Kyle Kulinski couldn't be there in person, so he decided to send a video. This was after Jill appeared on Crystal, Kyle and Friends. Just a reminder. Watch this.
To me, it's equally shocking and uplifting and so energizing to see people like Crystal Ball and Kyle Kulinski giving their endorsement to our work together here to put an end to genocide. So
did you guys hear that? So again, when people saw Jill Stein on Crystal, Kyle and Friends or whatever, and especially when you see this video from Kyle, people took it as an endorsement, and obviously including Jill as well. Now let's get into the video of what he said. Again, this was just a couple months. This wasn't that long ago.
I'm not sure who is going to switch us to that short video.
Hey guys, it's Kyle Kulinski here from The Kyle Kulinski Show and Secular Talk on YouTube, and also Crystal, Kyle and Friends. I want to wish Jill Stein a very, very happy birthday. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there with you tonight, but I wanted to lend a message of support. So we had her on the show the other day, and she really opened my eyes to a number of very disturbing things. First of all, to show you how terrible mainstream media is and how much they bury stories, I hadn't even heard of the fact that Jill Stein was assaulted at a pro-Palestine protests, and then cops had the nerve to charge her with assault. This is a presidential candidate and a woman who's over the age of 70. And they're so extreme and so egregious and so brazen that they charge her with assault when all she's doing is standing on the right side of history. Look, it reminds me of what happened during the anti-Iraq war protests. It reminds me of what happened during the anti-Vietnam war protests. It reminds me of what happened during the civil rights movement. The people who are on the correct side, the people who are doing the right thing in the moment, they get viciously smeared, and in this instance, also literally assaulted. So I heard that story, and it was grotesque, man. It was grotesque. And Jill also made another good point about how New York is effectively trying to keep the Green Party off the ballot by using dirty tricks. This is another thing that I was unfamiliar with. I mean, I know the myriad ways that they try to keep the Green Party off the ballot in multiple different states, but she gave specific examples of how New York is trying to do it. Again, this is another thing you don't hear the media talk about. And
so I just want to interrupt here for just a second and say the reason why I think he didn't know about those things is because he stays within his bubble. A number of the smaller channels, we covered all of that. We covered the arrest when Jill Stein was arrested, when she was, hit by the police. We covered that. We covered what was happening with the ballot access. We covered all these things. But when you stay in your bubble, that's how you miss these things. And if you're only focused on what's happening with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, that's how you miss these things. The New York thing, I don't understand that one as well, like how he really did not know about that because he's from New York. So you would think he would have known about what was happening there with ballot access. Let me continue.
Again, I'm ashamed to say that me, as somebody in media, I didn't even know about that, right? Jill also went on to make another phenomenal point about how if you look at some of these ideas that are now viewed as the duh positions on the progressive side now, a lot of it originated with the Green Party, man. Student debt abolition, free college, single-payer Medicare for all, the Green New Deal. They've always led the charge in saying we're anti-war. So again, I want to wish Jill a very, very happy birthday.
And Cenk Uygur, and the reason why I picked these two, because it's not just them, but the reason why I picked these two is because Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kulinski started Justice Democrats. So when he tells you that a lot of that came from the Green Party, now you know where they got that from. Because it's true, the Green New Deal was the Green Party's thing, and the Democratic Party took it and they watered it down. So just keep that in mind.
I want her to know that she has my support. I think she's very brave for running in this environment, in this climate. And look, bottom line is, there is one candidate in this race who is both on the ballot and anti-war. And we all know who that is. Donald Trump likes to pretend he's anti-war. He's not. Sometimes Biden likes to pretend he's anti-war. He's clearly not. He's arming and funding a genocide right now. Cornel West, I'm not sure he's going to get on that many ballots. And RFK, don't get me started. This is a guy who pretends like he's the most anti-war, but he's also in favor of Netanyahu committing a genocide and us arming and funding it. And he completely dehumanizes Palestinians on a regular basis. So from where I'm sitting, from my perspective, there's one candidate in this race that's doing the right thing and standing on the right issues. And, look, fighting for it at a time that's important historically where nobody else is stepping up and doing the right thing. And so, again, very happy birthday to Jill Stein. Sorry I couldn't be there with you guys today, but I'm there with you in spirit. And Jill, we wish the best for you moving forward.
Okay. So in that video there, when he said, I want to offer you my support, when people heard that, people were like, oh, he's endorsing Jill Stein. Again, this is way before Kamala was announced, before Biden dropped out, all of that jazz and stuff like that. But one of the things that was pointed out to me by Indie News Network was that he didn't retweet this. Apparently, like with this video on Twitter, when the message went out on Twitter, Indie News pointed out to me that he didn't retweet that announcement of the endorsement or anything like that. So when I covered that story and I was saying, oh, it looks like Kyle has endorsed Jill Stein, or he offered her support, I told people back then I would not get too settled on this, because as we get closer to November, he's most likely going to back the Democratic Party. And there were a number of people that contacted me via DM and via email and said, Sabs, just take this as a win and just be thankful that he's supporting a third party candidate. But I hate to say it, but I was right. Because now you'll see, this was right after it was announced that Kamala Harris was going to be the nominee. He was on Twitter saying, let's fucking go. There it is. Let's fucking go. And you can see the comments here. People like Harris W for Walls, let's go, right? I don't know who this person is, but they said, VP LOL, I get the excitement for walls, but Kamala's still there. You know this, right? Right? So the Kamala announcement, let's fucking go. Right? So once Kamala was announced, all of a sudden it was okay, let's go right back to the Democratic Party and let's go with this candidate now that they have someone that's not Joe Biden. But you told Jill Stein publicly on her platform that you were giving your support to her. However, whichever way he meant that. And it is like people are going to vote for who the fuck they want. I'm just talking about this to make a point. Because when it comes to the genocide, when it comes to that, in my adult life, I have not seen this. I have not seen this to a point where it was so public and so in your face where you could not ignore it. And for those of us that are in independent media, those of us that have heavily been covering this, there's no way I could just turn away from this and forget the images that I've seen. I can't forget the dead kids I saw. Those images don't fade away from me. So to me, it's weird because he was one of those people that also was calling out the genocide. I was like, wow, he's been really good on this. Like with the Israel stuff, because I'd stopped watching him for a while because he was getting a little too in the center. And I was like, he's really good on this. Like, him and Crystal are really good at calling this out with Israel and Gaza and that kind of thing. And you said all that to Jill Stein because you said that's the only candidate anti-war, against the genocide, yada, yada. But the moment Kamala Harris was announced as the Democrat nominee, you went right back over to what was comfortable. And to be fair, I'll show this as well. This is what he said after she said, I'm speaking to those protesters. So he even acknowledges here that she's not right on this Israel thing. Watch this.
Kamala, you know that they don't want Trump to win. Everybody attacking them knows they don't want Trump to win. The options for these people are as follows. Sit on the couch, vote Jill Stein, vote Cornel West, or vote Kamala Harris. That's what everybody, 99.9% of the people who are part of the uncommitted movement, that's what they're going to do. It's incumbent on you. It is your job to let them know, assuage their fears, and say, no, I'm going to go in a different direction on Gaza because we're not going to continue with green lighting an absolute bloodbath and a genocide. We're not going to send Israel endless money. We're not going to send them endless weapons. We're not going to, act like Netanyahu is a serious person who deserves our respect, right?
But Kamala Harris doesn't believe that. That's not what Kamala Harris supports. She's told you multiple times that, again, Israel has a right to defend itself. You see, she has the money from the Israeli lobby. You see, she's in bed with that. She's speaking at AIPAC conventions. She told you that she would never let it get to the point where Israel cannot defend theirself. So if you know that's not where she stands, why do you want Kamala Harris to lie to those protesters? And that's how this came across. This is what you should tell them, but that's not what she believes. And that's not what she feels, right? So he acknowledges here again that she's wrong on this issue.
She was doing well on this issue. She was very, very cold to Bibi in the meeting she had with him. She did not go to Bibi's speech. There's been signals that she's not totally in agreement with Joe Biden, who's an absolute psychopath Zionist on this issue and is totally fine with carpet bombing women and children. So she was showing good signs, but now this is definitely a setback. Look, here's the bottom line, guys. I'm not asking for the moon and the stars here, and I don't think the protesters are either. All we needed was sort of like, honestly, an Obama-like response. Obama knew how to handle protesters like this. People are bringing up the old, protests against Obama where some dreamers were He knows how to disarm them. He knows how to let them know, like, look, I hear you, bro. We're going to work on this, right? Even there was a clip of Joe Biden. Now, Joe Biden's policy on Gaza has been absolutely pathetic and horrible and the worst, right? But there even was a clip of Joe Biden that was floating around social media after this, where even Joe Biden was like, look, be gentle with it. There were pro-Gaza protesters interrupting him. He's like, look, be gentle with them. They're right. We have to care about Gaza. We need to put more care into Gaza. And so, look, her reaction could have been something as simple as, and I showed you the full clip, by the way. There's people who are showing a smaller portion, which makes it look a little worse than it is. I showed you the full thing. Like, clearly she struggles with it at the beginning and then she lashes out. But she very easily could have said, reiterate, yeah, look, I support a permanent ceasefire. And once I'm in the White House, we're going to bring peace to the region. There's going to be no more war. It's over.
But that would be a lie. AIPAC was retweeting Kamala Harris, you guys. AIPAC was. Kamala Harris is never going to put herself in a position where she is not going to give Israel weapons. And what did I tell you guys before about the double speak? If you're giving Israel weapons, you are not calling for a ceasefire. That's just the reality of the situation. So Kyle wants Kamala to be something that she's not. And I've watched him have this same type of rhetoric around Joe Biden. Do this, do that, and then eventually he just went along with it and started calling him Dark Brandon and all this kind of stuff because he realized that Joe Biden was only going to move so far, right? The same thing is going to be with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, all these people talking about she's progressive and all this stuff. Kamala Harris is not. She's a corporate AIPAC Democrat. Why do you think she has AIPAC retweeting her, telling her great job when she told the protesters I'm speaking? Why do you think? She's already in their back pocket. So anyway, he acknowledges that she's horrible on this issue, which I think is great. But this is what I want to say, man. Something I noticed over the years. In 2020, Kyle decided, he said he didn't vote for Joe Biden because he couldn't vote for someone who supported the Iraq war. Totally get that. What happened to that person? What happened to, I'm not going to support this person because of war? But now you can support a person that was a part of the administration that was given Israel the weapons to commit the genocide? You didn't want to vote for Joe Biden for something that he did way back in with Iraq and stuff, and totally understandable. But the genocide is still happening and you're ready to jump on and support Kamala Harris? And she's a part of the administration? Especially after what she said about Israel? So here's the thing, folks. And actually, we can leave this up here while I'm talking. I'm going to explain to you why this is happening. I think what people have to realize is that a lot of these channels that started during this secular talk's been around for a long time, but a lot of these channels that started during the Bernie wave. I think Secular Talk at one point was an atheist show, and then it moved into electoral politics and stuff like that. These channels have, I guess it seems like to me, they've basically relied on having a candidate that they can push, especially if you started during the Bernie wave and you were a part of that. So in 2016, they had Bernie Sanders. In 2020, they had Bernie again. So they had Bernie 2 election cycles in a row. So they were probably doing really well during that time, right? But after 2020, there was no more Bernie Sanders running for president again, and Joe Biden won. So if Trump would have won again, they would have been able to still profit off of Trump being president and all the I hate Donald Trump videos, right? But because Joe Biden won, then it would seem like to me they had to make a decision. Do we criticize Joe Biden heavily on the progressivism? Or do we just kind of be thankful that this is what we have and not Donald Trump? And it seemed like to me, from what I was seeing before October 7th, it seemed like people like Kyle and Cenk, they were willing to give Biden more credit than he should have deserved, especially when it comes to the economy. So now you find yourself in a different situation. They tried to find another progressive candidate. Remember Kyle said, I asked you to run when he was interviewing Marianne. I asked you to run for president. I'm glad you're running. So because there was no more Bernie Sanders, they had to find another progressive to fill that spot. That's where Marianne Williamson comes in. The only problem with that was Marianne was not as popular or as likable as Bernie Sanders. She didn't have that likability factor. And then also she was not good on foreign policy. We had these conversations with Marianne. She was not good on foreign policy. Then Marianne dropped out. So then at that point, Jill Stein was starting to surge, particularly right after she got arrested at the protest. Then the next thing you know, it's, well, we support you. Jill, I support you. I support your campaign. I support what you're doing. You're the only anti-war candidate. But Jill was trending and surging at that time. Then the moment that Kamala Harris is announced as the candidate and Joe Biden is no longer running, then they jumped onto the Kamala train. Look, at the end of the day, people are going to vote for whoever they want to vote for. But I've seen a lot of people not too happy about the flip. A lot of people have been talking about it. And it's not just them. It's not just Cenk and Kyle, Emma Vigilant too, and all that. All these people that were saying genocide was a red line, they're flipping and jumping on that Kamala train too. But it's not just about that. I picked out Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kulinski because they're the ones that created Justice Democrats. They know better. They're the ones that told us for years not to support corporate candidates. They're the ones that told us that you can't support someone who doesn't support Medicare for all, that people need health care. They were the ones that told us that the corporate money means that that candidate is going to, obviously have to do something for the interests of that corporate entity that they took the money from. They're the ones who told us. They're the ones who planned out the Justice Democrats platform. They're the ones that talked about the war. They're the ones that told us where you need to stand on Israel to be considered a social democrat. They're the ones who wrote the playbook for that, fam. They know better than anyone. So the fact of the matter is this: whether it was genocide or not, these people were never going to risk the popularity of their YouTube show to get behind any type of third party movement. And that's what I want people to understand, so that you understand why this is happening. People have to really grasp, like we were at a moment where we really could have had a huge third party. I mean, huge, considering with Russia, Ukraine, the economy was bad, the genocide in Gaza. This was really the best time I can remember in my lifetime where we really could have had a large, massive third party movement, because both parties nobody wanted Biden, and people were like, I don't want Biden, Trump again. This was the perfect time. And the people who had the largest platforms that said genocide was a red line, in the end, especially Kyle's, and he told Jill he supported her, in the end, they flipped right back over to the Democratic Party. And I'm just thinking to myself, imagine what we could have built. Imagine the energy that could have happened throughout the country if they would have persuaded their audience to, this is the time to build a third party movement. Brianna Joy Gray talks about this quite a bit. She said, we have to build it. And she's right. And it seems like to me, they don't want to build it because they don't want to do the work. Number one, it's not easy. But number two, they do not want to risk their YouTube shows, to risk their income, and to risk whatever credibility that they may have in the media space by starting some type of a third party movement. That's what this is all about. So they hopped on something when it was popular, and the moment something else popular came along, they hopped on that. What it shows is that you're not principled, and it is a problem. But none of these people are going to change the way that they do things because they have become very comfortable with what they do. And that includes all of them. I just keep thinking about what we really could have built. Secular Talk has over 1 million subs. Breaking Points has over 1 million subs. Do you guys realize, like, TYT has what, 5 million or whatever? Could you realize what we could have built if they would have used their platforms to push people outside of the duopoly? But let me take you back one moment. Remember, what does Breaking Points always say? We're the new mainstream. And in order to be the new mainstream, in order to be that, you have to be able to compete with mainstream media. And in order to compete with mainstream media, you have to be able to do some of the things that they do. That means that you have to be able to interview politicians. Breaking Points is in DC. I've seen them have Ro Khanna come right into the studio, come right in and interview in person. And in order for you to have access to those politicians, you got to play by their game a little bit. So if you're out there participating in a third party movement, that means you're going against what the Democratic Party wants. And if you're going against what the Democratic Party wants, these politicians are less likely to give you access, which means you will not have access to Congress members. That includes Ro Khanna, although he kind of weird. Ro Khanna kind of weird. He came on here too, so he might still pass. But that means that some of these politicians that you've had come onto your show, you will no longer have access to. And that includes someone like Orion Grimm, who also was the DC bureau chief for The Intercept. So he had more access to those politicians as well. And he's also a part of Breaking Points. So that means that he may lose his access with certain squad members like AOC or people that he's able to just go up to and talk to. So when somebody tells you that they're trying to become the new mainstream, that means that they're trying to become just that. And in order to become just that, you have to be able to do what they do. And the only way that you are going to do that is if you can also be able to bring in those politicians. You have to have that access. That's why they call it access journalism. It's unfortunate and it's sad, but I saw people getting really, really angry and upset about this. And all I want to tell you is, don't let it get you to that point where you get really angry and you're screaming and stuff about it. Because at the end of the day, if you go back and you look at the history, in the end, especially with TYT, they always end up telling you to go with the corporate Democrat. Kyle was the only one in 2020 that said he couldn't do it because of the Iraq war. But notice how he's come around. And for all these years, they told you not to support corporate Now, all of a sudden, it's no problem to support a candidate that takes corporate money. See how easily that went out the window? It's a dirty game.